Hi, I'm Nicole Ferraro, and this is The Divide, a podcast from Light Reading exploring the ongoing digital divide, why and where it still exists, and what needs to be done to get people everywhere connected to reliable, high speed internet. Today, I'm joined by Mark Colwell, Director of Broadband Operations at Mission Telecom, a nonprofit telecommunications provider and grantmaker, as well as Dylan Zajac, the founder of Computers for People, which is a nonprofit organization that Dylan founded in 2019 when he was in high school that provides refurbished computers and digital skills training to individuals in need. We discuss how Mission Telecom and Computers for People provide access to affordable broadband services and digital education, and we specifically discuss their partnership to deliver affordable connectivity to low-income households through their new Shield 5G home hotspot solution. All right. Mark and Dylan, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you both on. Since we haven't spoken before or had you on the podcast, I'm going to give you both an opportunity to introduce yourselves and the organizations that you come from. So, Mark, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself and the organization you're representing today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Nicole. Really appreciate it. My name is Mark Colwell. I'm the Director of Broadband Operations at Mission Telecom. We're a nonprofit wireless broadband provider and grant-making foundation. I have a deep history in this space. I'll give you just a few snippets of it. I spent about 8 years on Capitol Hill to start my career, so I have a good background in the regulatory and policy world. I spent a year at Dish Network. I have a master's in telecom engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder. And then I spent my last stop before joining Mission Telecom about 2 years ago was at the Colorado Broadband Office, where I was working on the BEAD and the CPF programs and closely involved with the digital equity team as well.
Wow. Okay. You have quite the history that now I want to get into all of that, but I will control myself. Dylan, coming to you. Tell us about Computers for People. Introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how and why this organization got started.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Nicole, for having me and having all of us on the call today. My name's Dylan. I'm the founder and executive director of Computers for People. I originally started 6 years ago in my bedroom after seeing in high school that all these computers were going into the landfill. And meanwhile, there were millions of people around the country that didn't have access to technology, but really needed it for all the great reasons that we know now: education, telehealth, job searching, affordable housing, so many different things that so many people were locked out of just because they didn't have this one tool. And I made it my mission over the next 6 years to dedicate basically my entire life to this cause and closing the digital divide. And so far, we've been able to distribute thousands of computers, help thousands of people access online resources, work with great providers like Mission Telecom, where we're able to provide free and low cost internet, and then also teach digital skills classes around the Northeast.
That's amazing. It's striking to me that you started this before the pandemic. I'm sure it became quite more important once that happened, and that you started it primarily for environmental reasons. It sounds like with electronics going into the landfills. Am I understanding you correctly?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, if we were to get
Yeah.
into like what I value more and what I think is more impactful, that's probably a different conversation. I'm happy to
For
get into.
sure. Yeah, look, I'm
Um,
trying to take you both down roads that we weren't planning on. Go ahead. Sorry.
but totally, you're absolutely right. Like there definitely was a need before the COVID pandemic and a huge untapped need. But what I think is people really didn't know about it as much. It wasn't
Yeah.
as publicized, even though it was still existing. And after the COVID pandemic or during it, that's when there's so many articles that came out, what the digital divide is, how you can help, why you should get involved. And then there's all these people that, just couldn't access the internet and were, had to connect to school buses to get online or weren't even allowed to get like even able to connect to school.
Yeah.
So it definitely blew up at that
Yeah.
point.
Well, I think that's so interesting and very cool that you started this from your bedroom. We're here to talk about a partnership between your organizations through which you guys are deploying something called the Shield 5G hotspot, which is an offering primarily for low-income families, is my understanding. I want to get to that, but how did your two organizations come to partner to begin with?
Yeah. So I can jump into that.
Sure.
So one of the biggest problems that I noticed when delivering computers to individuals in need and seeing, the impact of those donations was there was another side of this that we weren't able to actually solve, which was the internet part. The
Hmm.
fact that most people have to pay 60 to $100+ per month to access the internet in their homes.
Yeah.
And so since the very beginning, I've noticed this as an issue and I've wanted to solve it and find a way around all the complicated processes and government programs, all these things. I was like, what if there's just something simpler where we could give someone a computer and then within a minute they can sign up for a low cost internet plan?
Yeah.
And we ran a bunch of programs where we were able to give out free low cost hotspot devices to people in need. But what happened after those 12 or 24 months when people weren't able to pay for them anymore, or we didn't have the budget or the grant money to fund those anymore? There wasn't a very efficient model to flip those onto a paid plan. And
Right.
all those hotspots became e-waste. If you reach out to the thousands of school districts, they have closets of hotspots that are sitting dormant and are not used,
Yeah.
which plays into the whole e-waste problem. So that's sort of where it all started with Mission Telecom, and maybe I can hand it over to Mark um,
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. And from our angle, Mission Telecom was purpose built to serve nonprofits, schools, and libraries with affordable broadband. Our history goes way back all the way to the 80s when our founder applied for and got some spectrum licenses from the FCC. We did educational TV for a number of years. And in the early 2000s, when the FCC changed the rules, they gave us an opportunity to partner with what is now a subsidiary of T Mobile, but a company called Clearwire, to envision a world where we could use this spectrum resource to connect folks, particularly for educational purposes. So, as we try to deploy our service, we looked around the United States at organizations like Dylan's. There's a bunch of really great PC refurbishers, right? Folks who get computers that are donated and they refurbish them. So, rather than us stand up our own program, we partner with many of them around the country. They've got a device, which is something that many families can't afford. It's one of the reasons why they don't sign up for broadband in the first place, is they don't have the device or the skills to use it. And we're able to partner with them and bring service to the mix. And that helps solve the full solution for the digital divide. They now have a device. In a lot of cases, they're doing skills training. And then we can provide affordable service to get that family connected and at a price that they can stay connected.
Okay, awesome. Quick follow up for both of you, really. Mark, how is your organization able to do that? How are you all funded? Is really my question. And similar question for you, Dylan. How are you able to sustain all of this activity?
So we have a lease agreement again with a company called Clearwire. It's a subsidiary of T-Mobile, but we essentially receive two kinds of royalties: cash royalties, which help fund our operations and our grant program, as well as access to the T-Mobile network. And so that's how we're kind of self-sufficient. We're one of the lucky nonprofits that doesn't have to do fundraising on our own.
That is lucky. Yeah. Dylan, how about you guys?
Yeah, I wish we received royalties for our assets, but we pay a lot of money for our assets. Um, So for Computers for People, we have a bunch of different funding streams. Some of the main ones are grant funding from large companies that have foundations and really support the work that we do on the ground. Others are government grants. We were expecting to get a lot of government grants in the near
Yeah,
future.
we'll get
A
to
lot of
that.
those are yeah, we'll get to that exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but on top of that, we also have a lot of earned revenue models. So the computers that we deem as non-donatable get sold
Hmm.
by partners or recycled by partners, and that funds a large percentage of our operations. And we're scaling to the point where by the end of 2026, our goal is to be 100% funded by earned revenue so that we can sustain Computers for People forever without relying on a dip in government funding or a dip in foundational funding.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the main subject at hand, which is the Shield 5G home hotspot. So I understand that your two organizations partnered on an initial pilot deployment. So I want to talk about that, and then we'll get to the fact that it's now ramping up nationwide, which is very exciting. So tell us a bit about this product, what it is, how you guys came up with this plan to release it, and where was it initially deployed? Either one of you can take it first, and then jump in the other one.
Totally. Yeah. So when I was first starting to work with Mission Telecom, I was looking at the different solutions that they had for home use, because I think that's where people use the internet the most, is in their home. They want to be able to, go on their laptop or connect their smart TV or whatever, or even their Ring doorbell, and make sure that they can connect to the internet reliably. And it really started right here in Hoboken, New Jersey. I went to the Hoboken Housing Authority and talked to a lot of the residents and found out some of them were paying $120 per month for internet, and 40% of them didn't even have internet because they couldn't afford it. So I thought that was just insane. Secondly, I started talking to Mission Telecom. I was like, we have to change this. Like, what can we do here to provide an affordable solution? And they sent me a device that I tested out in the housing authority there, and it worked. It worked great. But the only problem was the device was $400, and it's like, how am I supposed to get someone to pay $400 with a $14.89 a month fee for the service, which is amazing, but that initial cost is so burdensome for some people. So I just started doing some research myself, talked to Mission Telecom, met with a lot of people, and found out, like, hey, this industry is not as complicated as we might think. And like, who's really making money here? Who's making the money in between? And I actually found a lot of the manufacturers that, like the original manufacturers that make these devices. And what I did was just go directly to them and say, hey, I want to make a device that's affordable for people, and cut out all these like 3 or 4 middlemen so that we can actually provide an affordable device. And that's how the 5G Shield home hotspot was born.
And just to add a little color to Dylan's issue, we're in the middle innings now of the 5G era, but the 4G era is 15 years old at this point. The 4G routers, the chipsets that were made 15 years ago, or in the last decade, let's say, those devices are about $50, right? They're pretty affordable. You can sometimes get them under $50. And a lot of the features on these hotspots are actually kind of expensive, like an LCD screen or some of the other features that add cost, but they aren't really necessary to the performance of the device. So as we look at the 5G era being, again, in the middle innings, newer, the devices, they haven't come down in cost yet. So, your typical 5G router hotspot, let's say, is somewhere between like $180 and $300, which is really expensive. But again, it has LCD screens, it has a better chipset, it has some of these costs that hasn't fallen the way that the 4G devices have. And so I think that was an opportunity, I think, for Dylan to think about, where are all the middlemen, and also what are the actual essential features of a hotspot that need to be in there for it to work properly. And that's what he's been able to achieve. We helped introduce him to some folks we knew. We have a lot of industry connections at Mission Telecom. Our team has about 240 years industry experience. So we were happy when Dylan brought the challenge to us to say, hey, we might know someone who can help. And being the whiz kid that Dylan is, he figured it out in relatively short order.
Yeah. So sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I'm just excited about the product because I'm using it every day. I'm using it right now, actually.
Oh, really? Well, we should say your connection is great.
How's my internet?
It's really good. Yeah, it's honestly one of the better connections that's been with me on this podcast recently.
Amazing.
No lag whatsoever. Yeah, and your picture's really clear.
Well, it's just, Dylan works with a lot of digital equity groups. We do too at Mission Telecom. And the other thing that's really great about this hotspot is that it's a very simple solution. for a lot of folks who aren't familiar with the internet or have never signed up or don't know how to use a computer very well, a modem with a router and an Ethernet cord, it gets pretty complicated. And I think that, your friend Mike Dano, who does the great reporting on the industry, he shows, through his research and the earnings calls and so forth, that fixed wireless is the fastest growing segment in broadband today. And it's because it's very simple to use, right? You plug it into the wall. In this case, it has a battery, so you can take it with you. So I want to just emphasize, like, the simplicity of the product is also really important because it's going to be a lot easier to use for a lot of the folks that we're targeting.
Yeah, and I think that that's super important. I want to get to that and also the price point. I think that you kind of spoke to how you arrived mostly at a price point that was going to be feasible for people to be able to adopt this product. But how did you arrive at these numbers? So the price point for the product itself, I understand, is like $149-ish, right? And then
Correct, yeah.
a monthly service is a little under $15 a month. How did you arrive at those numbers in terms of that being feasible for low-income populations to be able to afford this product? And tell me a bit about how you pair community outreach and digital education with this offering based. Yeah, go ahead.
Great question. Yeah. So what we originally did when we were first starting was reach out to the thousands and thousands of people that we've given computers to and basically send out a survey and say, okay, here's like the 10 things we can think of in terms of internet. Like, can you rank them in priority, whether it's like affordability, ease of use, setup, everything you could think of. And of course, like, some of our assumptions were correct. Affordability was number one by far. Connection was number two. The high quality connection, because people don't want their Zoom calls or their video games going out, which makes sense. But then also, one that we didn't notice, we didn't at least expect, was security was a big thing as well. People care a lot about the security of their internet. And that's something that we've actually been able to build into the device itself. We have a built-in VPN in every single Shield hotspot that gets delivered. But on the price point, what we did was try to make it just as affordable as we possibly can while also running our operations. So we really, we're not making money on any of the devices that we sell. We're getting that price point as low as possible to the point where we can keep it sustainably running, right? Like, we buy it for a certain price from our manufacturer, and then we sell it for a couple dollars more to cover the taxes and the shipping costs and all of that. Similar to the price of the internet itself at $14.89. And we did a lot of surveys on that as well and arrived at that price point. $10 to $15 range was within most people's budget, and it wouldn't prevent them from buying groceries or any of those essential purchases. They could afford that $14.89 per month.
In terms of the actual digital education piece, do you want to speak to that as well? Because I know that's an important part of your organization as well.
100%. Yeah, we've been working on our digital skills classes over the past 4 years and improving them every step of the way. We actually now teach classes in 3 different languages: in English, Spanish, and Arabic. And we're actually right now developing it in Haitian Creole. So what we do is hire local instructors from the community. So whether it's in Brooklyn, Jersey City, Massachusetts, we hire people locally that know their communities really well and are able to relate to their communities. We teach them with our own curriculum and also work with them to adjust the curriculum based on the community. And then we teach a 12-week course where it dives into all the specifics on how to turn on your computer, to create an email, to being safe online, everything. And then we also, within the curriculum, have them apply for 2 jobs, create a resume, and have all those essential workforce development skills, where that one brick, which is a computer, turns into a tool for unlocking your dreams, right?
Yeah.
That's what we think the internet and computers are. It's a tool for unlocking every opportunity that you ever wanted.
Yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. So last question on the pilot then, just remind me, what states was it initially rolled out in, and what lessons did you learn from the pilot that you're now about to take nationwide?
Great question. So we just started all of this, and we piloted it here in New Jersey and in Massachusetts, and we definitely learned quite a bit about like shipping, for example. Uh, a lot of people that we're working with don't have a permanent address.
Mm,
So, where are we supposed to ship a, a device or a SIM card when, maybe they're unhoused? So that's a
right.
lesson that we learned from the beginning. Like, how do we work with our 400 plus nonprofit partners to make sure people, get the equipment and get it safely and reliably? Um, and beyond that, just the ease of setup. Like we want it to be extremely easy for people to purchase it and set it up. So that's something that we're building into the product. We're like trying to see how can we make it as easy as possible for someone to get a new laptop and then connect to this device within, a couple seconds. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the other things we did, we were recently at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance's Net Inclusion
Yeah.
Conference, hanging out with all of our friends in the digital equity space, and I'm talking about the future of this segment. And we were able to connect with one of our friends from Portland. Free Geek is a big PC refurbisher, so we wanted to get some real world feedback. So we sent Juan home with a device to test out, and to give us a real kick of the tires, and the results were incredible. He had folks streaming HD video, multiple streams, playing games, downloading large files, and getting 250 350 megabits per second at all times. So it just is more validation that the product works really well. And that's what people expect. They expect the internet to never fail, which is really hard to do
Yeah.
in this industry. But the T-Mobile network that this is riding on is a really advanced, the best 5G network in the United States. And so we're fortunate that we have a very quality rate plan and a very affordable device that can access it and provide these kind of quality streaming and other kind of applications for folks.
Yeah. So now this is just available, right? Nationwide. We're out of the pilot project phase. Tell me a bit about, if I'm getting that right, and how people can actually find this service.
Totally. So they can go to computersforpeople.org/shield,
Hmm.
and the internet service itself is available, and you can buy it right now, and it'll arrive either through eSIM or physical SIM within a week. The device itself is available for pre-order. So we're taking
Okay.
pre-orders right now, and we're getting a bunch of different organizations together that are in this space, and we're all going to make a big pre-order, and then we're hoping to roll it out more on an individual basis, so people can just purchase one for their home in the near future. So we're looking for more nonprofit partners that want to get involved, want to make this device even more affordable in the future, and really close that divide quickly.
Okay, so nonprofit partners that are listening, get in touch with Dylan. We have a couple more minutes here, and I have 100 things I would love to ask you both about. So I'm going to roll a few topics into one. There's a lot going on in the country at the moment, and Dylan, you mentioned the expectation that you guys were going to get some grants. That is now, likely less likely to happen. I think you're referring to the cancellation of the Digital Equity Act. Am I right on that? Okay. Yeah, that's a yes. Okay. So I would love to hear a couple of things. First of all, how the cancellation of that program is impacting your plans, or, the expectations you had to be able to be funded by that. Another program that ended in the last year is the Affordable Connectivity Program, which I imagine would have been helpful for a lot of the populations that you guys work with. Do you think that we need a revived ACP program at the federal level or at state levels? Like, what would you like to see happen to help advance affordability for broadband in this country. And, Mark, you're coming from a broadband office, and we are speaking a few days after the new notice of funding opportunity came out for BEAD. And, there are a lot of different opinions on what that means for the ability to close the digital divide. But I'm also just curious about your perspective as someone who worked on the plan for so long, what this might mean for state broadband offices, and any final thoughts on the digital divide in the US and how you're feeling about our progress so far toward closing it. So I'm going to turn it back to you guys to respond to any number of those things that you like, and then I'll set you free. So,
Dylan, why don't you take the Digital Equity Act? I can speak to ACP a little bit and a couple of the other topics.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time. I'm not a historian, but I have read a little bit about the REA, which was like the Rural Electrification Agency or Association, something like that, by President Roosevelt, and looking at how electricity spread across the country, because it was very similar to internet and computers, and seeing how, in especially urban areas, electricity was very accessible, but mostly, wealthier people lived in urban areas, and rural areas were missing electricity, and they were left out of like this whole revolution. And like in the 19, I think 30s or whatever, during the New Deal, President Roosevelt saw this as a major issue and a major division in the country, and invested a lot of money during the New Deal to put money towards electrification in rural areas. And that's why it went to 99.9% of households in America have electricity, is because of the government intervention. And meanwhile, we had the DEA instead of the REA, and maybe that was the tool. I think it was the tool in order to close the entire digital divide, and get us to that 99.9% in this country. But potentially it is not the way, and we'll have to change the way that history happens, I guess. And we're going to have to take a different approach and be really innovative and resilient. And I think there's a lot of people in this industry that are going to be really, really innovative, and I'm excited to be part of it.
I mean, to address the ACP issue, the Lifeline program has been around in this country for a long time. It serves up to 135% of the poverty level with $9.25 per month. And the unfortunate thing is there's no broadband plan out there that's $9.25, right? It's just a little bit of help toward what is typically a larger cost. ACP comes along, you have a $30 per month. It's available to a larger population, and you get over 20 million households signed up, which is, shows that was a popular program, that it worked to get people signed up. You had industry buy-in, nonprofits, community groups. So I think the lesson there is we've got to find a more permanent way to find a subsidy that can cover more of a broadband bill. It seemed to me like a lot of the providers had a plan that was $30. They were able to make that work from an economic standpoint. That, to me, that's the biggest problem we have in the digital divide right now. From the access standpoint, we've got less than 10 million dots on the map, broadband serviceable locations, if you will, that need service. And BEAD and CPF should soak up a lot of that. The question becomes, how do you get folks to adopt the service? Right now, about 4 to 5 homes adopt and 1 out of 5 doesn't, right? If you look at the statistics on who's not adopting, low-income families can't afford it. Folks making less than $30,000 a year, only 57% of them are signed up, 43% are not. That also influences where businesses make investments. If you know that you can go to one neighborhood, a wealthy neighborhood, and 9 out of 10 homes are going to sign up, and another neighborhood, only 5 out of 10 homes are going to sign up, where are you going to invest your money? And so we've got to come up with a way to make it more affordable so folks will break down those barriers for why they don't subscribe. Like with Dylan's program, they need a computer, they need skills, they really need an affordable rate plan that's quality that they can use. So I think that Congress, it's really up to them to think about the broader universal service, all the programs, E-rate, which is also, the hotspot piece of it is being under attack today by, potentially Congress would eliminate that.
That's right.
You've got, the healthcare issues. Rural hospitals, it's very expensive to run healthcare in this country, and that program helps subsidize that. We need to re-envision what that looks like for folks to prevent healthcare costs. The rural operators that traditionally were building phone networks and got subsidized are now building broadband networks. But as we know, in those rural areas, they have a much sparser population to cover the cost. A piece of equipment that can go in a neighborhood with 1,000 homes is serving 100 homes. Same cost, right? There's no discount on the cost. So we have to find a way to maintain broadband affordability in rural areas as well. So that's kind of my commentary. I think it's really on Congress to look at the total universal service. Who's putting money in, contributing to the system, and how are we distributing it? And I think we could just build a menu of options in terms of a budget and understand, what do we want to achieve as a country? Do we want the 135% of poverty, 200% of poverty? We have different variables we could look at, come up with our budget number, and then we could look at who's contributing and how is it fair for who's contributing and who's receiving the subsidy on the other end. And then I guess finally, I would add one comment on the Digital Equity Act. We were at the Net Inclusion Conference, really spectacular event. If you haven't been, I would totally recommend it. And I was expecting it to be a little bit of a dismal environment, but there's a lot of hope and optimism among this community. I think that the digital equity folks are going to fight, first of all, and try to, this is law. The viewpoint there is, this is a current law. The funding should be available. And I would anticipate a court case at some point on this particular topic. But outside of that, this world has been around for many, many years. The digital divide's not going away. There's new technologies like AI that are going to create new divides that we're going to have to bridge. But this industry has relied on corporate philanthropy and other resources. And I think that'll be more of an emphasis, at least for the short term here. And then I think from Mission Telecom's perspective, we have a lot of capacity to serve and help folks out. And we kind of exist whether or not there's a program in place. We were written into several grants. We would have loved to see that influx of capital into the digital equity ecosystem, but we can live without it as well. And so that's our focus now, is how do we get corporate philanthropy, state and local folks interested in contributing to what is, in my view, it's not its own topic, digital equity. It's a part of everything else. It makes healthcare cheaper, education more efficient, commerce better. If we can convince folks who are funding things like that hey, this is a smarter, better, faster way to do it, I think we have a chance to weather this storm.
I think that's a great place to leave it. I want to thank you both so much for your time and for your excellent work in this field. And I hope to catch up with you again.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you again, Mark and Dylan, for joining me. Thank you as well to Pierre Landriau for editing this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for more episodes of The Divide, as well as interviews and insights from the Light Reading team. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.